So let's start with our introduction. The first thing to talk about is intersectionality. What is it? What does it mean? And how does this kind of feed into the analytic approach that I'm going to describe, intersectional MAIHDA? So intersectionality, you can think of this as the study of how individuals have multiple identities stemming from their socio-demographic characteristics, their gender, their ethnicity, and their social class. And all of these characteristics, they intersect and overlap with one another. There's huge diversity, of course, across individuals and all the different combinations of characteristics they have. And these characteristics are important because they affect how individuals are perceived by others and the behaviors of others to those individuals, as well as those own individuals' behaviors. And of course, there are many kind of social issues at play here to do with disadvantage and advantage, or discrimination, privilege, and power going on. And all of these are going to affect the lived experiences that individuals have. And these lived experiences will differ across different identities. And all of this ultimately manifests itself in inequalities and individual outcomes. So the term intersectionality was actually coined by a legal scholar, Kimberly Crenshaw, in the late 80s. And she was discussing employment discrimination cases brought by Black women who were struggling to be promoted to more senior positions in the company where they worked. And the issue actually wasn't one of gender discrimination, and it wasn't one of ethnic discrimination, and I'll explain why. It was specifically due to the combination of gender and ethnicity and being a woman and Black together, which is where the discrimination occurred. So the reason for this was that in the company at hand, there wasn't in general gender discrimination. Women did get promoted to senior positions, but these were white women being promoted, not Black women. And simultaneously, there wasn't ethnic discrimination in general. Black workers were being promoted to senior positions, but where they were, these were all men, with the women promotions happening in the office and the male promotions happening on the factory floor. Yet the combination of Black women, that subset of workers, they were not being promoted. Okay, the only place they could be promoted was in the office. They worked in the offices, not on the factory floor, and it was the white woman being promoted there. So there, the intersection really matters between ethnicity and gender, specifically for Black women. There was an additional struggle for them. Now, that's half the story. The second half of the story is when they brought this court case, the court said, well, you know, what kind of discrimination are you putting in for here? Are you saying that there's gender discrimination, or are you saying that there's ethnic discrimination? The court system didn't entertain or allow the possibility for the women to simultaneously put in a gender and ethnic simultaneous discrimination case, which is what actually happened to them. Because they could only put in one or other, it meant that their experience wasn't being recognized. So intersectionality is very much about these intersections and how these intersections can have unique experiences and receive unique discrimination as well. And you get these hidden, marginalized subpopulations, both in terms of experiences and in terms of whether the system does anything to correct this afterwards. And so these underlying issues of sexism, racism, classism are viewed as interlocking and inseparable. You can't study them in isolation. They need to be studied simultaneously. And of course, intersectionalist theorists, they demand reform and transformation of these systems to address these social problems. So that's my one slider on intersectionality. Now, changing our hats from kind of social science theory and analytic framework and general areas of study to one of a data analysis. Imagine, you know, in front of you, you have a spreadsheet of data. And let's say one row per individual, and we've got an individual outcome, let's say body mass index of individuals, because that's what we're going to study here. And it's related to socio-demographic characteristics, let's say gender and ethnicity. Now, everything I've said so far about intersections and unique experiences for subgroups would lead a data analysis to perhaps fit a linear regression of individual BMI on gender with a gender dummy, a dummy for being female, for example, and ethnicity with ethnic group dummy variables for Black, for example, versus a majority white group. And crucially, an interaction between being female and being Black. And via that, one would hope to pick up the issues we had talked about on the previous slide. However, since intersectionality was first kind of studied, this has expanded much beyond just looking at gender and ethnicity, and other issues like social class, religion, sexuality, disability are all important as well, and also all feed into individuals' multiple overlapping identities and the experiences they have as a result of that. So you might answer that by saying, well, we can always put in those extra variables into the model, and because we're kind of particularly focused here on intersections and studying those, we could introduce more interactions. But very quickly, you have an overwhelming number of two-way interactions before you even consider potential three-way interactions, four-way interactions between 3 and 4 variables at a time. And this introduces statistical and interpretation challenges. So statistical challenges will relate to the fact that these parameters of the interactions will often be identified off very small pockets of data and will be very erratic and imprecise as a result. And because there are many, many parameters, there's a risk of making type 1 errors of inference, which is where you find false positives. And you latch onto a significant result where you see it and go, aha, this is going on there. But actually, it's a chance result. And interpretation challenges because in linear regression, if you start to have three-way interactions, four-way interactions potentially, it gets very hard to explain all these interactions to an audience. And so the consequence of all of this is that researchers just don't do it. They might put in 1 or 2 interactions, but they don't kind of systematically explore this. So they're not systematically exploring intersectionality. And the risk is you will miss important marginalized populations. Just like in the previous slide, how we talked about the fact that Black women had a unique experience, which was being missed by the court system because it didn't entertain that degree of complexity. So this shifts us now into intersectional MAIHDA, and with MAIHDA standing for multi-level analysis of individual heterogeneity and discriminatory accuracy. And so this is an approach which is a response to the inadequacies of linear regression, really, which syncs very nicely in many ways onto the concepts in intersectionality, and we'll talk through this in the coming sessions. But really, for those of you who are familiar with multi-level modeling, really at its simplest, we're talking about a multi-level linear regression. It's going to be a 2-level linear regression where the levels of analysis are the individuals and their socio-demographic identities. Okay, individuals at level 1, socio-demographic identities at level 2. And these identities are the combination of the identities stemming from their multiple characteristics. So this is where this idea of strata come in. Okay, so it's unique combinations of gender and ethnicity and social class and disability, which uniquely define a subpopulation of people. And so we've got individuals nested within these kind of almost social contexts derived from the data. There might be tens of them, hundreds of them even. So one particular example might be the subset of individuals who are male, Hispanic, high school educated with low income and an age band 18 to 29. Another one would be exactly the same, but where we now have the female subset of that. And we're very much interested in how average outcomes, which are the manifestation of many issues in society to do with disadvantage and advantage, how those mean outcomes vary across the strata. So the approach of intersectional MAIHDA was proposed by Evans in 2018, Claire Evans. Juan Merlo's done a lot of work in this area. I've done some work both with Claire and Juan Merlo and others on intersectional MAIHDA as well. And of course, there are other methodological and substantive contributors to this literature. So what we shall do is reanalyze the BMI example presented by Claire. So this is the original paper, really. So we've got Claire Evans as first author here, and in social science and medicine, and you can see a multi-level modeling approach to modeling health inequalities, BMI, was her example, at the intersection of multiple social identities. So in that issue, Juan Merlo wrote a response, a commentary, on the approach, and you can see here now in the title, it says multi-level analysis of individual heterogeneity and discriminatory accuracy within an intersectional framework. And so this is the kind of language which is now commonly used to describe this method of analysis, intersectional MAIHDA. And MAIHDA was already around to describe a particular type of way of doing multi-level analysis, and this has been now applied to the intersectional approach. And Claire, myself, Subramanian again, who was on the first paper, and Juan Merlo have written a tutorial recently, which is under review, which will give a journal article treatment, very complementary really to this short course presentation of materials that I'm giving here. Okay,